Anna Finizio. So, Anna, close this off. We'll close for today on the coronavirus topic.
Well, that'll make a nice change for us.
And a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week actually, I heard on the radio there's something about there's been changes to financial regulations around consumer data. Is that correct?
It is correct, Antonio. And they're actually really quite broad changes. So it's the consumer data right laws, and it really can relate to any of our data. So the first step is in relation to the banking sector. So they're calling it open banking. And what it will allow is you to actually have more control over the data that the banks have, relating to you. And at its very, very basic nature, it will enable you to request your bank to release data relating to you to a third party. And the third party is likely to be a Fintech or another sort of, financial provider who can then use your data to find you perhaps a better deal or a better, bank to move to. So I think the idea behind it is to improve customer choice and competitiveness in the sector.
Well, what is this word?
It's a cool word. So it's a computer program or another technology which is used to support or enable banking and financial services. So in the context of the consumer data rights laws, there's been, in order to be a third party, you've actually got to be accredited. So you've got to go through a process, and that's with the Australian Consumer Competition and Consumer Commission, who's sort of overseeing the regulation of this. And if there's a Fintech called Frollo, they're out of New South Wales, and what they will then do is, you'll allow them, you'll consent to them using your data. So at the moment, from 1 July, it's only the top 4 banks who are sort of impacted under the law. So the Commonwealth Bank, the ANZ, the National Bank of Australia and Westpac, and they can actually then take your data and go, okay, well, you're spending X, Y, Z, we think this financial product will be better for you. If you're a small business, they might be able to find you, a better lender, a better mortgage or a loan option. So that's, the role of a fintech in this context. And I think given the changes in the laws, we're going to see a lot more fintechs pop up in this space.
So what you're saying is the big 4 can or will have to give your data to this Frollo?
Correct. If at your request, only on your request and with your consent.
So it applies at the moment to the big 4?
Yeah, and soon it will roll out to the smaller banks. And at the moment it's, only data relating to your credit and debit cards and your deposit and transaction accounts. But what will happen is soon they'll bring in smaller banks, and then by the end of the year, it'll actually branch out. So you can request your data around your home loan, your investment loan, other personal loans. So they're slowly but surely expanding the scheme, and then it'll go into other services like the energy sector, that will be next, and then the telecommunications sector.
What's the point of fintech now? In this context, because I was just saying earlier before we came back to where I've used a service online, which I thought was just obvious nowadays. We do so many things online. I didn't even consider it fintech, but it is. And I was able to transfer monies from my account overseas in a matter of hours, which I thought was just amazing. It wouldn't have been considered possible until very recently.
I think what the great opportunity and the great service that fintech might provide, I don't know about you, Antonio, but doing mortgage documents and looking around, like even someone with a legal background, that just blows my mind. I just couldn't think of anything worse. And apparently the research shows in Australia, people are unlikely to change banks even when they're not happy with them. So this, the whole, one of the points underpinning the scheme is that, having a third party who will do this for you, it might encourage, banks, and other sectors in the future to be more competitive, because, you're going to have a third party, a fintech, who's going to do all this hard work for you, which is ideal for someone like me and probably a lot of people, and really show you where you can find a better offering.
Okay, so it's the Trello people that do that.
So there's only 2 accredited parties so far. This is quite an onerous process, and obviously because it's the data itself is so precious, we don't want people doing the wrong thing with the data. So at the moment there's 2 companies out of New South Wales, but that will obviously increase over time.
So I guess an objective is to give more power, relative power to consumers.
And ownership of your own data. I mean, that's how valuable is data, and it's something that we can't easily get at the moment from the banks, our own personal data.
Our own personal data. And as you were saying, this is about changing providers. I was reminded of the same issue around electricity prices, for example. And in South Australia a couple of years ago, we had a scheme where the government actually wrote to consumers saying, actually, there are these various options available for you to get maybe cheaper prices. And people, maybe because we don't know where the cheaper prices are, they just take too much time.
I think it's a bit of both. Knowledge is power, as we know, and just having the time, I guess, to sit down and, it can be complicated. And when you're looking at different products as well, even different financial products, sit there and read the fine print. Not everybody has the time or even maybe the knowledge and skills to do so. So allowing someone else to do that for you, it's so convenient, and I think it will hopefully open up consumer choice dramatically.
I just heard about it on the 1st of July when this was happening, and I think I'm reasonably up to date with information and consumer and current affairs. Was this something that just happened just suddenly?
Nothing in the law usually happens too suddenly, Antonio, but it has been in the pipeline for a while, since 2017, and it took some time. There was a bill that went to our federal parliament that sort of lapsed, and then they brought in, a second bill, and then it eventually passed, and then, it's sort of coming into a staggered effect. So from 1 July, we had the big four banks. Later this year, more will happen. Next year, energy will come in, and probably COVID's had a lot to do with maybe, things not happening as quickly as they may have first intended, or probably the reason why we haven't heard much about it either. It's because our news has been so dominated by coronavirus.
Well, actually, that suggests that not only having these rights is important, but people knowing that they have these rights and knowing how to take advantage of them. And I'm wondering whether there is a system that will disseminate this information, or is it up to these Trello and other fintechs?
Well, fintechs, obviously will advertise in order to generate business for themselves, but you're right, it was fairly, it went under the radar, and I mean, it might just be that it's, there's so much else happening in the world, but yeah, it probably could be better ventilated to the public. I mean, if you search online, you'll find it, but you've really probably got to be in the know. So yeah, I think it's great that we're talking about it, and hopefully some people might, look at taking it up.
Information and using it online with technology, is it going to be hacked?
Well,
what sort of privacy issues?
You'd hope not, but there's definitely, obviously there's excellent aspects of the scheme in that we're going to increase consumer choice, hopefully competitiveness in the financial sector, and then the other sectors to which the consumer data rights will apply. But obviously, and this is something that's maybe, one of the reasons why it took so long to get the scheme off the ground, is the issue of privacy. So it's an opt-in scheme. A consumer has to consent. They have to opt in. They have to consent, show their identity to the bank. They've got to consent to the data being transferred, and they can stop consenting at any time, and that's it. And they can say, well, I only give you access to X, Y, Z data. So that's one of the protections in place. But some of the fears, I guess, potentially with the scheme is that, a third party might actually be, mislead someone or deceive someone to suggest that they might be accredited to receive the data. There might be insufficient security controls on the data. So, hacking, that type of thing. So we need to make sure that there's, controls and processes in place to protect consumers, from any interference, from loss of data.
And let's say something like that does happen. How could we?
Well, if you feel that perhaps that's happened to you, and really you'd hope that it wouldn't. There are a lot of guidelines in place. Obviously, there's an accreditation system as well, and any companies that breach or banks that breach the guidelines can be fined or prevented, and any fintechs as well can be fined and prevented from collecting data. So there's some punishment in place. So we mentioned before that the Australian Consumer and Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC, are overseeing sort of the regulatory scheme. There's also the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner. So you can make a complaint to the Information Commissioner or to the Australian Financial Complaints Authority. But if you feel that, or if an accredited provider hasn't complied with the privacy safeguards or the rules or the IT system requirements, there'll be punishment.
I guess it's a bit like we are fairly well protected for identity theft or credit cards being taken. Yes. Yeah. So what happens when, just going back to the credit card issue, I've heard of people where it's happened that they're in Adelaide and some transactions appear in other parts of the world.
That's actually happened to me before.
Oh, yes.
It happens to lots of people.
Yes.
So many people I know it's happened to them as well. So in the first instance, you contact your bank and generally they'll investigate. They'll see that it's fraudulent, that someone's, obtained your details. And, generally you get your money reimbursed generally.
Well, this sounds actually quite encouraging, even though, as you said, people generally don't change banks.
But this might change that for people, Antonio, because the hard work's done for you. Plus, it's the opportunity, and this is the great thing about fintechs that are emerging, to actually really cater for your personal situation. So look at your spending habits, your needs, and really come up with something, personally, which would be of great benefit or really quite attractive to you, rather than just looking at a general product and going, well, that might be okay. Really, that's really valuable. So that's where your data is so important.
In many respects, it reminds me of when telephone number portability was brought in. So you weren't necessarily stuck with a particular provider, because if you have to change your telephone number, all your contacts wouldn't know that, and that's very costly in time and inconvenience. That would have kept you more connected, locked in with a particular provider. And so it opens up possibilities for the consumers. I mean, that's one of the benefits of information technology and computers, that on average, it gives more power to the consumer, to the individual.
And I think at the moment, Antonio, in the middle of COVID, we've relied on technology more than ever before, and it could be the beginning. I mean, there will no longer be a need really for you to physically go into your bank, really, at the way things are going with the new data right rules. So, yeah, I think, technology obviously has its drawbacks sometimes, as we all experience, but it's promising, I think, in terms of what these new laws might provide in terms of consumer choice, and hopefully increase competition in Australia in a number of sectors going forward.
Indeed. Well, I reckon, we've had a very long conversation so far. Maybe it's time to go and get a coffee.
Sounds good to me.
And listen to a bit more Gigi Finizio, and then some news. So let's go with Gigi Finizio, Amore, Amore.